I am Martha Reynolds, 63 years old, and I devoted my entire life to my daughter Tiffany after my husband Daniel passed away. Last month, I arrived at her engagement party with an expensive gift and a heart full of pride, only to discover she had seated me at the children's table. The sting of that humiliation was still fresh when Tiffany sauntered over, laughing about the seating arrangement before asking if I would help fund her $100,000 dream wedding. She had no idea I had already found someone more deserving of my life savings. Before I continue my story, I would love to know where you are watching from today. Please hit the like and subscribe buttons while I gather myself to share what happened next. The journey that led to that devastating moment at the engagement party began 23 years ago. I became a single mother when my beloved husband Daniel lost his battle with pancreatic cancer. Tiffany was only 8 years old at the time, a bright-eyed little girl with pigtails who couldn't understand why her daddy wasn't coming home from the hospital. I remember the night before Daniel passed. He squeezed my hand with what little strength he had left and whispered, "Promise me you'll give Tiffany everything, Martha. Promise she'll never want for anything." With tears streaming down my face, I made that promise, not realizing how it would shape the next 2 decades of our lives. Those early years were brutally difficult. I was a school administrator at Franklin Elementary, but my salary wasn't enough to maintain the comfortable lifestyle Daniel's income, as an engineer, had provided. I took on additional jobs grading papers in the evenings and working at a local bookstore on weekends. Sleep became a luxury, but Tiffany's well-being was my priority. Despite our financial struggles, I made sure Tiffany never felt the pinch. When she wanted dance lessons, I found the money. When she needed a new computer for school projects, I worked extra shifts. When she begged to attend Westfield Academy, a prestigious private school with an excellent arts program, I somehow made it happen by cutting back on everything for myself. "You spoil that girl too much," my sister Barbara would say during our Sunday phone calls. "She needs to learn the value of money, Martha. She's already lost her father," I would reply defensively. "I don't want her to lose anything else." In those early years, Tiffany was sweet and affectionate. She would make me handmade cards for my birthday and hug me tightly before bed each night. "I love you to the moon and back, Mommy," she would say, echoing the phrase from her favorite bedtime story. Those moments sustained me through the exhaustion and grief. The first signs of change appeared during her high school years at Westfield. Tiffany began making friends with classmates from wealthy families, children who received cars on their 16th birthdays and took skiing vacations in Aspen. Our modest 3-bedroom house in the suburbs suddenly became a source of embarrassment for her. "Could you drop me off around the corner?" she asked one morning before school. I told Amber and Madison I live in Oakwood Heights. The Oakwood Heights neighborhood was where the doctors and lawyers lived, in homes 3 times the size of ours. I felt a pang in my chest but nodded and did as she asked. "Just a phase," I told myself. All teenagers are a bit embarrassed by their parents. When Tiffany was selected for the lead role in the school play, I couldn't have been prouder. I attended every performance, sitting in the front row and bringing bouquets of daisies, her favorite flower. After the final show, I waited in the lobby with the other parents, excited to congratulate her. When she emerged surrounded by friends, I waved enthusiastically. She glanced my way, gave a tight smile, then turned back to her friends without introducing me. Barbara noticed the changes too. During a family dinner to celebrate Thanksgiving, she pulled me aside in the kitchen. "That girl walked right past you when you asked for help with the dishes," she observed, her voice low. "And did you see how she rolled her eyes when you mentioned your work at the school?" "She's just tired," I said, arranging sweet potatoes on a serving dish. "Finals are coming up and she's stressed." Barbara placed her hand on my arm. "Martha, I love you and I love Tiffany. But you need to open your eyes. That promise you made to Daniel doesn't mean you have to let her treat you like a doormat." I shrugged off her concern, continuing to make excuses for Tiffany's behavior. The truth was too painful to acknowledge. I had invested everything in being the perfect mother, and admitting I might be failing was unthinkable. Still, I couldn't ignore the growing distance between us. The goodnight hugs became less frequent, then stopped altogether. "Though I love you," that once came so easily was now rarely spoken. But I kept giving, hoping that my unconditional love would eventually bring back the sweet daughter I remembered. When Tiffany received her acceptance letter to Brentwood University, an exclusive private college known for its prestigious arts program, I should have been prepared for the cost. The tuition alone was more than I made in a year as a school administrator. But the look of pure joy on Tiffany's face as she danced around our living room with the letter clutched to her chest made any sacrifice seem worthwhile. "I got in, Mom. I actually got in," she squealed, her eyes shining with excitement for the first time since Daniel died. "Of course you did, sweetheart," I said, pushing aside thoughts of how we would afford it. "I never doubted you for a second." That night, after Tiffany went to sleep, I sat at our kitchen table with a calculator and a stack of financial documents. The numbers wouldn't add up, no matter how many times I tried. Even with Tiffany's partial scholarship and student loans, we were still short by tens of thousands of dollars. There was only one option left. The following Monday, I met with a financial advisor at my bank. "I want to cash in my retirement fund," I told him. His eyebrows shot up. "Mrs. Reynolds, I strongly advise against that. The penalties are substantial, and you're only 15 years from retirement age." "I understand the consequences," I replied firmly. "But my daughter needs this education." The advisor sighed and pushed the paperwork across his desk. "I hope she appreciates what you're doing," he said. I signed the forms with a steady hand, thinking of Daniel and my promise to him. Tiffany would have everything, even if it meant I would have nothing. The day I drove Tiffany to Brentwood was bittersweet. Her dorm room was spacious and modern, nothing like the cramped dormitories I had experienced in college. We unpacked her belongings together, arranging her clothes in the closet and setting up her new laptop on the desk. "This is it," I said, sitting on the edge of her bed. "You're officially a college student." Tiffany glanced at her phone. "Mom, there's a freshman mixer starting in an hour. I should probably get ready." I took the hint and stood up. "Of course. I should hit the road anyway before it gets dark." She gave me a quick, distracted hug. "Thanks for the ride and everything." "I love you, Tiffany," I said, lingering by the door. "Love you too," she replied, already scrolling through her phone. The 4-hour drive home to an empty house was the loneliest journey of my life. During her freshman year, our communication dwindled to brief text messages and occasional phone calls that usually ended with Tiffany asking for money for books, supplies, or social activities. Meanwhile, my nephew Riley, Barbara's son who attended the local community college, called me every Sunday without fail. "Just checking in on my favorite aunt," he would say. "How are you holding up with Tiffany gone?" Despite his own struggles working part-time jobs while studying nursing, Riley always made time to connect. He reminded me so much of Daniel with his thoughtfulness and quiet determination. The contrast between Riley's appreciation and Tiffany's growing indifference became increasingly difficult to ignore. When Tiffany came home for winter break, she spent most of her time texting friends from school or complaining about how boring our town was compared to the city where Brentwood was located. "Can we at least update this place while I'm home?" she asked, gesturing around our living room with its comfortable but worn furniture. "It looks exactly the same as when I was in middle school." I swallowed my hurt. "Maybe we could pick out some new throw pillows together," I suggested. Tiffany rolled her eyes. "Never mind. It's not worth it for the 2 weeks I'm here." The pattern continued through her sophomore and junior years. Her visits home became shorter and less frequent. When I suggested driving up to visit her at school, there was always some reason why that weekend wouldn't work. The Mother's Day of her junior year was particularly painful. I had made reservations at Salvatore's, the Italian restaurant where we had celebrated special occasions since she was little. 2 hours before our planned dinner, my phone rang. "Mom, I'm so sorry, but I have to cancel dinner," Tiffany said, not sounding particularly sorry. "Jasmine's parents invited a bunch of us out on their yacht today, and I can't pass that up." "But I made reservations weeks ago," I said, my voice small. "It's Mother's Day. We can celebrate when I come home next month," she replied. "This is a networking opportunity. Jasmine's dad is connected to all the major galleries in New York." I ate alone at Salvatore's that night, the waitstaff giving me pitying looks when I explained my daughter couldn't make it. I ordered Tiffany's favorite tiramisu to go, though I knew it would sit uneaten in my refrigerator until it spoiled. By her senior year, Tiffany had transformed into someone I barely recognized. Her clothes were expensive brands I couldn't afford to buy her. Gifts from new friends, she explained. Her speech was peppered with references to exhibitions and restaurants I had never heard of. When I asked about her classes or professors, her answers were vague and dismissive. I attended her graduation ceremony alone, Barbara having to work that weekend. I arrived early to secure a good seat, my heart swelling with pride despite everything. Tiffany looked beautiful in her cap and gown, confident as she walked across the stage to receive her diploma in fine arts. After the ceremony, I searched through the crowd of graduates, finally spotting Tiffany with a group of friends and what appeared to be their families. I approached with a bouquet of daisies, a callback to her high school performances. "Congratulations, sweetheart," I said, hugging her. "I am so proud of you." Tiffany accepted the hug stiffly. "Thanks, Mom." I stood awkwardly as she made no move to introduce me to her friends or their parents. After a moment, she glanced at her watch. "There's a department reception starting soon." "That sounds lovely," I said hopefully. "I'd love to meet your professors." Her expression tightened. "It's really just for students and faculty. Besides, it's pretty specialized talk about art theory and contemporary movements." The implication was clear. I wouldn't understand or fit in. I nodded, fighting back tears. "Of course. I should get going anyway." "The drive back?" "Right," she said, looking relieved. "I'll call you next week." As I walked back to my car alone, I realized Tiffany had never once mentioned to her friends that I worked in education. Perhaps a school administrator wasn't impressive enough in her new world. The thought broke my heart all over again. It was during her final semester at Brentwood that Tiffany met Trevor Caldwell. I learned about him in fragments during our infrequent calls. His family owned vineyards in Napa Valley. He was studying for his MBA. He had connections to galleries in New York and Los Angeles. He thought Tiffany's work showed remarkable promise. "He gets me, Mom," Tiffany said, her voice animated in a way I hadn't heard in years. "He understands the kind of life I want to live." I was happy she had found someone special, though a small voice inside wondered what kind of life she wanted that was so different from the one I had provided. The first time I met Trevor Caldwell was 6 months after Tiffany's graduation. They had both moved to San Francisco, where Trevor was working for a venture capital firm, while Tiffany attempted to establish herself in the city's competitive art scene. I flew out for a weekend visit, my first real vacation in years, staying at a modest hotel I could barely afford. Trevor was tall and conventionally handsome, with the confident bearing of someone who had never worried about money. He greeted me with a firm handshake rather than a hug, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Mrs. Reynolds, a pleasure to finally meet you," he said, his voice smooth as polished marble. "Tiffany has told me so much about you." I wondered what exactly Tiffany had told him, given how little we had spoken in recent months. Their apartment was stunning. A spacious loft in a converted warehouse with exposed brick walls and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay. Original artwork hung on every wall, and the furniture looked like it belonged in a design magazine. "This is lovely," I said, setting my overnight bag down carefully. "The view is incredible." "Trevor's family knows the owner," Tiffany explained, exchanging a look with him that I couldn't interpret. "We got a special rate." Later I would learn that special rate meant the apartment was 3 times what I paid for my entire mortgage. The realization that my daughter now lived in a world completely disconnected from our middle-class reality was jarring. During dinner at an exclusive restaurant where Trevor was greeted by name, I tried to connect with him, asking about his family and background. "The Caldwells have been in the wine business for 4 generations," he explained between bites of Wagyu beef that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. "My father expanded into real estate in the 90s. Smart move, really. Diversification is key in any investment strategy." "That sounds fascinating," I replied, though in truth, I found his focus on wealth and status uncomfortable. "And your mother? What does she do?" "Victoria sits on the boards of several cultural foundations," he said. "She's particularly involved with the Symphony and the Modern Art Museum. That's actually how I first became interested in the arts, which eventually led me to Tiffany." He smiled at my daughter, who beamed back at him. I tried to find common ground. I've always loved visiting our local art museum. They have a wonderful collection of American Impressionists. Trevor nodded politely, but I could see I had failed some invisible test. Local museums with their modest collections were clearly not in the same category as the prestigious institutions his mother supported. Throughout the weekend, I noticed how Tiffany seemed to be adapting herself to fit into Trevor's world. Her speech, her mannerisms, even her laughter had changed. She was constantly checking his reactions, adjusting her behavior accordingly. It reminded me of when she was a teenager, desperate to fit in with her wealthy classmates at Westfield Academy. The most telling moment came when I mentioned a funny story from Tiffany's childhood, about how she had once set up an art gallery in our garage, charging neighbors 25 cents to view her crayon drawings. "Mom," Tiffany interrupted, her voice tight. "Nobody wants to hear those old stories." "I think it's charming," Trevor said with a condescending smile. "Everyone starts somewhere after all." The implication that my daughter's humble beginnings were something to be overcome rather than celebrated stung deeply. 3 months after my visit, Tiffany called to tell me they were moving into an even larger apartment in Pacific Heights, one of San Francisco's most exclusive neighborhoods. "Trevor's father made some calls," she explained. "The waiting list for this building is usually years long." "That's wonderful, sweetheart," I said, trying to sound enthusiastic while calculating how I would afford a plane ticket for another visit. "Maybe I can come see it this summer." "Oh, this summer is probably not good," she replied quickly. "We'll be traveling a lot. Trevor's parents have a villa in Tuscany, and we'll be there for most of July. Then there's a gallery opening in Berlin that my work might be featured in." Each call followed a similar pattern. Tiffany would share news of exotic trips, exclusive events, or expensive purchases, then deflect my attempts to plan a visit or invite her home. The only time she showed real interest in talking to me were when she needed money for art supplies or gallery fees that Trevor apparently didn't cover. "It's an investment in my career, Mom," she would say. "This could be my big break." I continued to send money, dipping into my savings each time, telling myself that Daniel would have wanted me to support her dreams. But I couldn't ignore the growing reality that our relationship had become transactional. I gave money and support. Tiffany gave occasional phone calls and vague promises of future visits that never materialized. During this time, my nephew Riley graduated from community college and was accepted into the nursing program at State University. Despite working 30 hours a week as a hospital orderly and helping care for my sister Barbara, who had developed rheumatoid arthritis, he still made time to check on me regularly. "Aunt Martha, you sounded down last time we talked," he said during one of our Sunday calls. "Is everything okay with Tiffany?" I hesitated, reluctant to voice my concerns about my daughter to anyone, even Riley. "She's just busy with her art and Trevor's family," I said finally. "It's a different world out there." Riley was quiet for a moment. "You know, being busy is never an excuse for not making time for the people who love you. That's something you taught me." His words brought tears to my eyes. At least someone had been listening to my life lessons, even if it wasn't my own daughter. The first time I met Trevor's mother Victoria was at a gallery showing featuring some of Tiffany's work in San Francisco. I had scraped together enough for the flight and a new outfit, wanting to make a good impression. Victoria Caldwell was a tall, slender woman with perfectly styled silver hair, and the kind of understated jewelry that whispered old money. "So you're Tiffany's mother," she said, assessing me with cool blue eyes. "How nice that you could make it all this way for her little exhibition." "I wouldn't have missed it," I replied warmly. "I'm so proud of her accomplishments."
Victoria nodded.
"Yes, she has potential." Trevor says with the right connections and guidance, she could make quite a name for herself. The emphasis on right connections made it clear she didn't think Tiffany had received those from me. Throughout the evening, I watched as Victoria introduced Tiffany to various influential people, her hand resting possessively on my daughter's arm. Tiffany smiled and laughed at all the right moments, occasionally glancing toward Victoria for approval. Not once did she introduce me to anyone or include me in these conversations. When I finally managed to get a moment alone with Tiffany near the refreshment table, she seemed distracted, her eyes constantly scanning the room. "Your work is beautiful, Tiffany," I said sincerely. That large canvas with the abstract cityscape is especially powerful. Thanks, she replied absently. Victoria thinks it's too derivative of Rothko, but the gallery owner loves it. Well, I think it's uniquely yours, I offered. I can see elements of those drawings you used to do from your bedroom window when you were little. Tiffany frowned. That's not the influence at all. It's a commentary on urban isolation and the fragmentation of community in digital spaces. Before I could respond, Victoria appeared at Tiffany's elbow. Darling, the Harringtons just arrived. You must come say hello. Lawrence is curating that group show in New York next month. Tiffany immediately brightened. Of course. She left without a backward glance, leaving me alone with my glass of cheap white wine, feeling like an outsider in my daughter's life. The call came on a Tuesday evening in April as I was grading papers at my kitchen table. Tiffany's name flashed on my phone screen, a rare enough occurrence that I immediately felt a flutter of anxiety. Had something happened? Was she ill or in trouble? Tiffany? Is everything okay? I answered, unable to keep the worry from my voice. Mom, everything is perfect. Her voice bubbled with excitement. Trevor proposed last night. We're engaged. Relief washed over me, followed by genuine happiness. Despite all the complications in our relationship, I wanted nothing more than for my daughter to find joy and love. That's wonderful news, sweetheart. Congratulations. Tell me everything. How did he propose? For the next 20 minutes, Tiffany described in detail how Trevor had arranged a private after-hours tour of the Museum of Modern Art, culminating in a proposal in front of her favorite Frida Kahlo painting, complete with a 4-carat diamond ring and champagne served by white-gloved waiters. It was absolutely perfect, she sighed. Like something out of a movie. It sounds magical, I agreed, pushing away thoughts of Daniel's much humbler proposal in the park where we'd had our first date, with a simple solitaire he'd saved for months to buy. Different times, different worlds. So, I ventured, have you thought about dates or venues yet? I'd love to help with the planning if you need it. There was a slight pause. Actually, Trevor's mother Victoria is handling most of the arrangements. She has connections with all the best wedding planners and venues in Napa. Oh, I tried to hide my disappointment. Well, that's very kind of her. But I'm your mother. I'd like to be involved too. Of course you'll be involved, Mom, Tiffany said quickly. We're planning an engagement party next month. You'll come to that, right? I wouldn't miss it for the world, I assured her. Just tell me when and where. Maybe I could help with that? I could handle the invitations or centerpieces or something. Another pause. Victoria has it under control. She's hosting it at the Caldwell estate. But there is something you could help with. My spirits lifted. Anything, sweetheart. The engagement party is going to be quite elaborate, Tiffany explained. Open bar, gourmet catering, live music. Victoria suggested it would be appropriate for the bride's family to contribute to the cost. The hope that had been building deflated instantly. Not a request for my input or assistance, just my checkbook. I see, I said carefully. And how much were you thinking? 5,000 would be helpful, she replied casually, as if asking me to pick up milk on the way home. The florist alone is charging 3,000 for the arrangements. I closed my eyes, thinking of my dwindling savings account. After helping Tiffany with various career investments over the past 2 years, my financial cushion was dangerously thin. That's quite a lot of money, Tiffany. I know it's not nothing, Mom, she said, a hint of impatience creeping into her voice. But this is important. Trevor's family is expecting a certain level of presentation. I don't want them to think we can't contribute properly. As if Tiffany and I were a unit in this scenario, rather than her simply asking me to fund her impression management with her future in-laws. I'll figure something out, I said finally, knowing I would have to dip into the emergency fund I had been maintaining since Daniel died. Thanks, Mom. You're the best. Her tone brightened immediately. I'll text you all the details for the party. Got to run now. Trevor's taking me to dinner with some of his investors. After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, staring at the stack of student papers I had been grading. My daughter was getting married. It should have been a time of joy and connection, of shared excitement and planning. Instead, I felt like an ATM machine dispensable except for the financial support I could provide. The following weekend, I visited Barbara, needing to talk to someone who would understand my conflicted feelings. We sat in her garden, watching Riley mow the lawn for her, his movements careful and deliberate. $5,000 for an engagement party? Barbara shook her head in disbelief. Martha, that's ridiculous. Does she have any idea what that money means to you? She's just excited about starting her new life with Trevor, I said, automatically defending Tiffany even as doubts gnawed at me. His family lives very differently than we do. Barbara fixed me with a stern look. And that's reason enough for her to bleed you dry? What's next? How much will the wedding cost you? I shifted uncomfortably in my chair. Actually, I've been thinking about that. I have $75,000 saved. It was originally for my retirement, but after using part of it for her college, I mentally earmarked the rest for her wedding someday. $75,000? Barbara's voice rose, causing Riley to glance over curiously. Martha, that's everything you have. Daniel would have wanted her to have a beautiful wedding, I said softly. Daniel would have wanted you to be treated with respect, Barbara countered. Do you really think he'd approve of how Tiffany has been treating you? The canceled visits? The constant demands for money? The way she barely acknowledges your existence unless she needs something. Her words stung because they contained the truth I had been avoiding for years. She's just caught up in Trevor's world right now. Once they're married and settled, things will change. Barbara sighed deeply. The only thing that's going to change is your bank account balance, unless you start standing up for yourself. Riley finished with the lawn and approached us, wiping sweat from his brow. All done, Mom. Aunt Martha, are you staying for dinner? I'm making lasagna. She'd love to, Barbara answered for me. Riley, tell your aunt what you were telling me last night about your nursing program costs. Riley looked embarrassed. Mom, Aunt Martha doesn't need to hear about my problems. It's not a problem, I assured him. I'd like to know what's going on with you. He sat on the edge of a garden chair. It's just that the nursing program costs have gone up again. I'm working as many shifts as I can at the hospital, but with Mom's medical bills and the reduced hours so I can attend classes. He trailed off, clearly uncomfortable discussing finances. He's been sleeping only 4 hours a night, Barbara added. Working at the hospital, attending classes, studying, and taking care of me when my arthritis flares up. I don't mind, Mom, Riley said quickly. We'll figure it out. Watching my nephew, who had never asked me for a dime despite his struggles, I felt a sharp contrast with Tiffany's casual expectation of thousands of dollars for flowers at a party. The seed of an idea began to form in my mind, but I pushed it away, not yet ready to acknowledge what it might mean. In the weeks leading up to the engagement party, I shopped carefully for the perfect gift and outfit. I couldn't compete with the luxury brands Tiffany now favored, but I found a beautiful silver photo frame and had it engraved with Tiffany and Trevor's names and engagement date. For myself, I splurged on a blue silk dress that the saleswoman assured me was both elegant and appropriate for the mother of the bride. Tiffany's communication during this time consisted of one brief call confirming I had sent the $5,000 check for the party, and a text message with the address and time information. No questions about my travel plans or offers of accommodation, though the Caldwell estate was a 3-hour drive from my home. The night before the party, I couldn't sleep. Despite everything, I was excited to celebrate this milestone in my daughter's life and hopeful that the occasion might somehow bridge the growing distance between us. I packed the wrapped gift carefully in my car, along with an overnight bag for my stay at a modest hotel nearby, and tried to quell the anxiety that had been building since our phone call. Tomorrow will be better, I told myself as I finally drifted off to sleep. Tomorrow I'll get my daughter back just for a little while. I had no idea how wrong I would be. The Caldwell estate sprawled across 30 acres of prime Napa Valley real estate. The main house a Mediterranean-style mansion with terracotta roof tiles and creamy stucco walls. As I drove through the wrought iron gates, following a line of luxury vehicles, I felt increasingly out of place in my 10-year-old Honda. A valet in a crisp uniform approached as I pulled up to the circular driveway. Good evening, ma'am. I'll park your car for you. Thank you, I said, handing him my keys and retrieving my overnight bag and Tiffany's gift from the trunk. I had arrived exactly at the time specified on the invitation, 5 o'clock, not wanting to be even a minute late for such an important occasion. The massive front doors stood open, revealing a soaring entryway with a crystal chandelier and marble flooring. A uniformed server offered me a glass of champagne from a silver tray as I entered. I accepted gratefully, needing something to calm my nerves. "Martha, you made it." The voice belonged to Tiffany, who approached wearing a stunning white cocktail dress that probably cost more than 3 months of my salary. She air-kissed near my cheek, careful not to make actual contact. "You look nice." The slight hesitation before nice told me my carefully chosen blue dress didn't quite meet the standard of the occasion. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," I said sincerely, holding out the wrapped package. "This is for you and Trevor. Congratulations again." "Thanks, Mom." She took the gift and handed it immediately to a passing server without even looking at it. "You can put your bag in the coat room through there. Most guests are gathering on the back terrace. Dinner will be served at 6:30. With that brief interaction, she was gone, swept back into the crowd of elegant strangers. I made my way to the coat room, then followed the flow of guests toward the terrace, feeling increasingly invisible. The back of the house opened onto a stunning vista of vineyards stretching toward distant mountains. White canopies had been erected over dozens of round tables draped in ivory linens and decorated with elaborate floral arrangements. A string quartet played softly in one corner, while servers circulated with trays of appetizers. I recognized Trevor immediately, standing with a group of men in expensive suits, his arm draped casually around Tiffany's waist. Nearby, Victoria Caldwell held court with several elegant women, all sporting the same sleek hairstyles and tasteful jewelry. For nearly an hour, I wandered the edges of the gathering, smiling politely when someone met my gaze but largely ignored. Not once did Tiffany come to check on me or introduce me to anyone. I saw her laughing and chatting animatedly with Trevor's relatives and friends, playing the role of the perfect future Caldwell. Finally, a bell chimed, signaling guests to find their tables for dinner. Each table had a small card listing the assigned guests. I moved from table to table, searching for my name, growing increasingly confused when I couldn't find it among the adult seating. "Are you looking for your seat?" A server approached with a sympathetic smile. "Yes, I'm Martha Reynolds, Tiffany's mother." The server's face registered a flash of recognition, then discomfort. "Ah, Mrs. Reynolds. You're at table 15. Let me show you." He led me across the terrace to a smaller table set apart from the main grouping. As we approached, my heart sank. Seated around the table were children, ranging in age from about 5 to 10 years old. "There must be some mistake," I said, my voice barely audible. The server looked uncomfortable. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Reynolds. The seating arrangements were approved by the hosts." With an apologetic nod, he hurried away. I stood frozen, unable to process what was happening. My own daughter had seated me, her only living parent, at the children's table of her engagement party. The humiliation washed over me in waves, hot and then cold, making my ears ring and my vision blur at the edges. A small voice broke through my shock. "Are you sitting with us, lady?" I looked down to see a little girl with curly blonde hair looking up at me curiously. The innocence in her eyes anchored me, preventing me from dissolving completely. "It seems that I am," I managed to reply, lowering myself into the empty chair. "I'm Lily," the little girl announced. "I'm 6.5. That's my brother Jake. He's 10 and thinks he knows everything." Despite my distress, I found myself smiling at her matter-of-fact introduction. "I'm Marta. It's nice to meet you, Lily." As the children chattered around me, I glanced across the terrace. At a prominent table near the center, I could see Tiffany seated between Trevor and Victoria, laughing at something Victoria had said. Had she even noticed where she had placed me? Did she care? From a nearby table, I caught snippets of conversation from a group of women approximately my age. One of them, a sleek brunette with an expensive-looking haircut, was speaking just loudly enough for her voice to carry. Victoria said the mother is some sort of public school employee, she said with a dismissive wave of her hand. Can you imagine? Apparently, she showed up in a department store dress. Victoria was mortified. Another woman leaned in, her diamond earrings catching the light. I heard she seated her with the children to avoid any awkward conversations with the Harringtons and Winthrops. Smart move, really. They laughed, the sound like glass breaking in my ears. I sat rigidly, pretending to be absorbed in helping the little boy next to me cut his chicken into manageable pieces, while inside I was crumbling. I had two choices. Make a scene by confronting Tiffany and leaving dramatically, or endure the humiliation with as much dignity as I could muster. I thought of what Daniel would advise. Never let them see they've hurt you, Martha, he would say. That just gives them power over you. So I stayed, making conversation with the children, who were far better company than many of the adults present. I learned about Lily's ballet lessons, Jake's soccer team, and 5-year-old Max's collection of dinosaur toys. They didn't care about my department store dress or my job as a school administrator. They just appreciated my genuine interest in their lives. Dessert had just been served, an elaborate concoction of chocolate and raspberry, when I saw Tiffany approaching my table. She wore a bright smile that didn't reach her eyes, with Trevor following a few steps behind. "Mom, are you having a good time?" she asked, her voice artificially cheerful. I looked at her, searching for any sign of the daughter I had raised, the little girl who once said she loved me to the moon and back. "The children have been lovely dinner companions," I replied carefully. She laughed as if I'd said something amusing. "They can be more entertaining than some of the adults, that's for sure." She glanced at Trevor, who smiled indulgently. "Anyway, we wanted to talk to you about something important." "Oh." I set down my dessert fork, steeling myself. "We've been finalizing our wedding plans," Tiffany continued brightly. "We've found the most amazing venue in Santorini, an exclusive resort overlooking the caldera. It's absolutely breathtaking." "Santorini? In Greece?" I asked, feeling increasingly disconnected from the conversation. "Yes, it's the perfect backdrop for the aesthetic we're going for," Trevor interjected. "Very exclusive, very photogenic. Tiffany's work deserves that kind of setting." Tiffany nodded enthusiastically. "The thing is, Mom, destination weddings aren't cheap. The venue alone is $50,000. Then there's the catering, flowers, photography, my dress. We're looking at around $120,000 total," Trevor added casually, as if discussing the price of a dinner out rather than a sum that exceeded my annual salary several times over. I stared at them, momentarily speechless. Tiffany took my silence as an invitation to continue. "So we were wondering about that wedding fund you mentioned a while back," she said, her voice taking on a wheedling quality I recognized from her teenage years when she wanted something expensive. "The one you said you started when Dad died. That would really help us create the wedding of our dreams." The mention of Daniel in the same breath as this obscene display of materialism and disrespect finally broke through my shock. I looked from Tiffany to Trevor and back again, seeing them clearly for perhaps the first time. "You seat me at the children's table," I said quietly, "humiliate me in front of everyone here, and then ask me for $75,000? Tiffany had the grace to look momentarily uncomfortable, but recovered quickly. "Don't be so dramatic, Mom. The tables were assigned based on conversational compatibility. I thought you'd be more comfortable with the kids, given your work and all." "My work?" I repeated. "You mean my career as an educator? The job that paid for your dance lessons, your private school tuition, your college education when I cashed in my retirement fund." Trevor shifted uncomfortably. "Perhaps we should continue this discussion later in private." "Yes, people are starting to look," Tiffany hissed, her facade cracking slightly. I stood up slowly, my legs unsteady beneath me. "I think I should leave now." "Mom, don't be like this," Tiffany said, glancing around nervously. "What about the wedding fund? We need to know if we can count on it for the deposits." In that moment, something crystallized within me, a clarity I had been avoiding for years. "I need some air. Excuse me." I walked away from the table, away from my daughter and her fiancé, away from the curious stares of the children and the judgmental glances of the other guests. I made it to the edge of the terrace before Victoria intercepted me. "Leaving so soon, Martha?" she asked, her tone suggesting she had expected nothing less. "Tiffany mentioned you might not stay for the entire celebration." Had my own daughter predicted I would leave early because of her deliberate humiliation? Or had she simply told Victoria I wouldn't be staying to preemptively explain my absence? "I'm not feeling well," I said, the words true in a way Victoria couldn't possibly understand. "Please give Tiffany and Trevor my congratulations again." Victoria nodded, clearly relieved to see me go. "I'll have someone bring your bag from the coat room." 10 minutes later, I was in my car, driving away from the Caldwell estate with tears streaming down my face. The beautiful photo frame I had given Tiffany would probably end up in a drawer somewhere, never displayed. The $75,000 she expected would fund a spectacle in Santorini that I likely wouldn't even be invited to attend except as an obligation. Another box to check on Tiffany's perfect wedding planning list. For the first time, I allowed myself to consider a possibility that had been growing in the back of my mind. Perhaps it was time to redirect my resources toward someone who actually valued my presence in their life. I called the hotel on my drive away from the Caldwell estate, canceling my reservation for the night. I couldn't bear to stay so close to the scene of my humiliation. Instead, I drove straight home, the 3-hour journey passing in a blur of tears and painful revelations. By the time I pulled into my driveway, it was nearly midnight. The house was dark and empty, a fitting metaphor for how I felt inside. I dragged myself to the bedroom, not bothering to turn on lights or change out of my blue silk dress, and collapsed onto the bed. Sleep evaded me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Tiffany's face as she casually asked for my life savings after seating me with the children. I saw Trevor's patronizing smile and Victoria's dismissive glance. I heard the laughter of those women discussing my department store dress. Around 2 in the morning, I reached for my phone and called the one person I knew would answer, no matter the hour. "Barbara." My voice cracked. "I'm sorry to wake you." "Martha." My sister sounded instantly alert. "What's wrong? Are you okay?" The concern in her voice unleashed the sobs I had been suppressing. Between gasping breaths, I relayed the events of the evening, the children's table, the casual request for $75,000, all of it. "I'm coming over," Barbara declared, no room for argument in her tone. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. True to her word, Barbara arrived shortly after, letting herself in with her spare key. She found me still in my party dress, curled into a ball on my bed. "Oh, Martha," she sighed, sitting beside me and stroking my hair as if I were a child. "I'm so sorry she hurt you like this." "What did I do wrong?" I whispered. "Where did I fail her?" Barbara's hand stilled. "You didn't fail her, Martha. If anything, you loved her too well, too unconditionally. You gave and gave until giving became expected rather than appreciated." We talked through the night, Barbara making us tea that grew cold as I poured out years of accumulated pain and disappointment. The sky was beginning to lighten with the first hints of dawn when my phone rang again. I glanced at the screen, expecting Tiffany, perhaps calling to demand an explanation for my early departure. Instead, I saw Riley's name. "Riley." I answered, confused. "It's 5:30 in the morning." "I know, Aunt Martha, I'm sorry," he replied, his voice tight with worry. "Mom texted me that you were upset. I'm just finishing my night shift at the hospital, and I wanted to check on you before I went home to sleep." Fresh tears welled in my eyes, this time from a different emotion entirely. Here was my nephew, exhausted after a 12-hour shift caring for others, taking time to call and check on me. "I'm okay, Riley," I assured him, though my voice betrayed me. "Just some difficulty at Tiffany's engagement party." "What happened?" he asked, the genuine concern in his voice a balm to my wounded heart. I gave him the abbreviated version, too drained to relive every painful detail again. I don't even know what to say, Aunt Martha," Riley said after a long pause. "Except that you deserve better. You're one of the most loving, generous people I know. Anyone would be lucky to have you as their mother." His words lodged in my heart, filling some of the emptiness Tiffany had created. After we hung up, Barbara looked at me thoughtfully. "You know, Riley's still struggling to pay for his nursing program. He would never ask you for help, but I've been thinking about that," I admitted. Last night, watching Tiffany and Trevor talk about spending $120,000 on a single day, while Riley works himself to exhaustion just to stay in school. Barbara nodded, understanding where my thoughts were leading. The wedding fund. Daniel wanted me to give Tiffany everything, I said slowly. But I don't think he meant at the expense of my self-respect. And I know he would have adored Riley, seen how hard he works, how much he cares for others. What are you thinking, Martha? I took a deep breath. I'm thinking it's time I redirected my resources toward someone who actually values me as a person, not just a checkbook. The decision once made brought an unexpected sense of peace. For years I had been pouring my love, attention and resources into a relationship that had become increasingly one-sided. Perhaps it was time to nurture connections that were mutually respectful and genuinely caring. The following week, I invited Riley to meet me for coffee at a quiet cafe near the hospital where he worked. He arrived looking tired but smiling, giving me a warm hug before sitting down. How are you doing, Aunt Martha? Mom said you've been pretty upset since the engagement party. I'm doing better now, I said, surprised to find it was true. Actually, I wanted to talk to you about something important. Riley looked concerned. Is everything okay? Are you sick? His immediate worry for my health rather than what I might want from him spoke volumes about the difference between him and Tiffany. I'm fine, I assured him. But I've been thinking a lot about your nursing program and how hard you've been working to make ends meet while caring for your mother. Riley shifted uncomfortably. It's not that bad, Aunt Martha. Lots of students have it worse. That may be true, but not many of them are also helping care for a parent with a chronic illness, I pointed out. I want to help you, Riley. I have some money set aside. Money I had originally intended for Tiffany's wedding. I'd like to create an education fund for you instead. His eyes widened. What? No, Aunt Martha, I couldn't possibly accept that. That's Tiffany's money. It's my money, I corrected gently. And I've decided I want to invest it in someone who values education, hard work, and family. Someone who checks on me in the middle of the night just to make sure I'm okay. Riley's eyes filled with tears. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. Just accept the help and focus on becoming the incredible nurse I know you'll be. He reached across the table and gripped my hand tightly. Thank you, he whispered. I promise I won't let you down. I know you won't, I said, feeling truly at peace with my decision for the first time. 3 days later, the call I had been expecting finally came. Tiffany's name flashed on my phone screen, and I braced myself before answering. Hello, Tiffany. Mom. Her voice was tight with barely controlled anger. I've been trying to reach you for days. We need to talk about the wedding fund. No inquiry about how I was feeling or why I had left the party early. No acknowledgement of the children's table incident. Just straight to the money. Yes, we do, I agreed calmly. I've made a decision about those funds. Great, she said, her tone instantly warming. Trevor's mother found the perfect wedding planner for Santorini. She just needs the deposit by next week to secure the date. I took a deep breath. I'm not contributing to the wedding, Tiffany. There was a moment of stunned silence. What? I've decided to use that money to create an education fund for Riley. He's struggling to pay for his nursing program while caring for your Aunt Barbara. Riley. Tiffany's voice rose in disbelief. My cousin Riley? You're giving him my wedding money to Riley. It was never your money, I said firmly. It was money I saved from my earnings that I had intended to give you as a gift. But after the engagement party, I realized that my gifts to you are no longer appreciated or respected. This is about the seating arrangement? Tiffany scoffed. You're punishing me over something so trivial? Victoria handled all that anyway. It's not trivial to be seated at the children's table at your own daughter's engagement party, I replied, my voice steady despite the emotions churning inside me. And it's not trivial to be asked for $75,000 immediately afterward. As if my only value to you is financial. You're being ridiculous and selfish, Tiffany snapped. Dad would be so disappointed in you. The mention of Daniel stung, but I stood firm. Your father would be heartbroken to see how you've treated me. He wanted me to give you everything, but he never meant for me to enable disrespect and entitlement. If you do this, Tiffany threatened, her voice cold, don't expect to be invited to the wedding. In fact, don't expect to hear from me at all. The ultimatum hung in the air between us. 5 years ago, even 1 year ago, it would have devastated me, sent me scrambling to apologize and acquiesce to her demands. Now it simply confirmed I was making the right choice. I love you, Tiffany, I said softly. I always will. When you're ready to have a relationship based on mutual respect, rather than what I can give you materially, I'll be here. Don't hold your breath, she spat and hung up. I set the phone down carefully on the kitchen counter, expecting to feel devastated. Instead, there was a curious sense of lightness, as if I had set down a heavy burden I had been carrying for too long. For the first time in years, maybe decades, I had prioritized my own self-respect over Tiffany's demands. It hurt, of course. The thought of not attending my only daughter's wedding created an ache deep in my chest. But alongside the pain was something unexpected. Pride in myself for finally establishing boundaries that should have been set long ago. The weeks following my confrontation with Tiffany were some of the most painful and liberating of my life. True to her word, she stopped calling and texting entirely. I would sometimes find myself picking up my phone to share some small piece of news with her, only to remember we weren't speaking. Each time the grief would wash over me anew. Yet alongside the grief, new connections were flourishing. Barbara and I grew closer than we had been since childhood, having dinner together twice a week and starting a book club with 2 other women from our neighborhood, Eleanor and Judith. Riley called regularly, updating me on his nursing program and his mother's health. Professor Jenkins said my patient assessment skills are some of the best in the class. He told me during one of our Sunday calls, pride evident in his voice. She said I have a natural empathy that can't be taught. That doesn't surprise me at all, I replied warmly. You've always been able to understand what others are feeling, even as a little boy. These conversations filled some of the void left by Tiffany's absence, reminding me that family connections could be nurturing rather than depleting. 3 months after the engagement party incident, I began seeing a therapist named Sophia, a gentle woman with kind eyes who helped me understand the patterns that had developed in my relationship with Tiffany. You made a promise to your husband that you interpreted as requiring complete self-sacrifice, Sophia observed during one session. But real love, the kind that helps people grow, includes boundaries. Without them, we enable harmful behavior rather than supporting healthy development. Her words resonated deeply, helping me forgive myself for what I had previously seen as failures in my parenting. Perhaps the greater failure had been my inability to set appropriate limits on Tiffany's increasingly entitled behavior. Do you think she'll ever speak to me again? I asked Sophia during another session, voicing my deepest fear. I can't predict that, she replied honestly. But I can tell you that by establishing healthy boundaries now, you've created the only foundation upon which a healthier relationship could potentially be built. I clung to that hope, allowing myself to imagine a future where Tiffany and I might reconnect, not as benefactor and recipient, but as 2 adults who genuinely valued each other's presence. 6 months after our falling out, Riley invited me to attend a special ceremony at his nursing school, where he was receiving a scholarship for excellence in clinical practice. I wouldn't have made it this far without your help, Aunt Martha, he said when he called with the invitation. It would mean everything to have you there. The ceremony was held in a small auditorium at the university, nothing like the elaborate venues Tiffany and Trevor favored, but filled with a warmth and sincerity that touched my heart. Watching Riley walk across the stage to receive his certificate, his face glowing with pride and determination, I felt a profound sense of rightness about my decision to support his education. That's my nephew, I whispered to the woman sitting next to me, unable to contain my pride. You must be very proud, she replied with a smile. I am, I said, realizing the words were absolutely true. He's going to make an amazing nurse. After the ceremony, Riley introduced me to his professors and classmates, his arm around my shoulders as he told everyone, "This is my Aunt Martha. She's the reason I'm able to be here today." The contrast with Tiffany's engagement party, where I had been hidden away at the children's table and not introduced to anyone, couldn't have been more stark. As spring turned to summer, I began to rebuild my life around the people who genuinely valued me and the activities that brought me joy. I joined a community garden, started volunteering at a literacy program for adults, and even took a watercolor class I had been putting off for years, always too busy supporting Tiffany's dreams to pursue my own. It was during this period of growth and healing that the first tentative message from Tiffany appeared on my phone. It was brief, just a link to an article about an art exhibition where one of her pieces had been featured with the text, "Thought you might want to see this." I responded simply, "Congratulations, Tiffany. Your work looks beautiful." A week later, another text. "Trevor and I scaled back the wedding plans. We're having it at his parents' vineyard instead of Santorini." I wasn't sure how to interpret this communication. Was it a peace offering? A hint that she still expected some financial contribution? Or simply a neutral update on her life? I decided to respond with equal neutrality. "That sounds lovely. Napa is beautiful year-round." Our exchanges continued in this careful, distant manner for several weeks. She never directly addressed the engagement party incident or my decision about the wedding fund, and I didn't push the issue. It was a fragile reconnection, but a connection nonetheless. Then in late August, a letter arrived in my mailbox, handwritten on expensive stationery. Tiffany's handwriting had always been distinctive, with looping letters and artistic flourishes. Seeing it brought a lump to my throat. I sat in my garden to read it, surrounded by the late summer flowers I had planted that spring. "Dear Mom," it began. "I've started and discarded this letter a dozen times, struggling to find the right words. The simplest version is this. I'm sorry. Sorry for how I treated you at the engagement party. Sorry for taking you for granted all these years. Sorry for valuing the trappings of Trevor's world more than my relationship with you." Tears blurred my vision as I continued reading. Victoria and I had a falling out last month. She criticized my latest artwork as pedestrian and suggested I was only included in the Harrington Gallery show because of Trevor's connections. It hurt deeply to be dismissed so casually by someone whose approval I had been seeking for years. It made me think of all the times you praised my work, from my first crayon drawings to my college portfolio, always with genuine enthusiasm and never with the conditional approval Victoria offers. I realized I had been chasing validation from someone who would never truly give it, while pushing away the person who had always believed in me unconditionally. "I understand why you gave the wedding money to Riley." I was hurt and angry at first, but with some distance, I can see that he appreciates your support in a way I had stopped doing. He values you as a person, not just for what you can provide materially. I don't expect you to forgive me immediately, or to trust that I've truly changed. Actions matter more than words, I know that now, but I would like the chance to rebuild our relationship on more equal and respectful terms this time. With love, Tiffany. I read the letter 3 times, my emotions cycling between hope, caution, and a deep, aching love for my daughter that had never diminished despite everything. She was reaching out, acknowledging her behavior, asking for another chance. It was more than I had dared to hope for. My response would need to be carefully considered. This was an opportunity to establish a new dynamic between us, one based on mutual respect rather than the unhealthy patterns of the past. I would need to be honest about my feelings while leaving the door open for reconciliation. As I sat in my garden, reflecting on Tiffany's letter, I realized how much I had grown in the months since the engagement party. The Martha who had allowed herself to be seated at the children's table without protest was not the same Martha who now understood her own worth. Loving someone unconditionally, I had learned, didn't mean accepting mistreatment. It meant caring enough about both yourself and the other person to establish healthy boundaries. Daniel's request for me to give Tiffany everything had never been about material things, but about giving her the tools to become a compassionate, respectful adult, something I had failed to do in my eagerness to spare her any discomfort or disappointment. The following week, I attended Riley's white coat ceremony, marking his transition to clinical rotations. As I watched him solemnly recite the nursing pledge, promising to provide compassionate care to all patients, I felt a profound sense of peace. The money that might have funded an extravagant destination wedding was instead supporting this dedicated young man's journey to help others. After the ceremony, Barbara Riley and I went out to dinner to celebrate. As we raised our glasses in a toast to Riley's achievement, I thought about Tiffany's letter waiting at home for my response. "To Riley," I said, "and to the journey of learning what truly matters in life. To family, Riley added, his eyes meeting mine with genuine affection. And to second chances. I nodded, thinking of the tentative olive branch Tiffany had extended. Perhaps there would be a second chance for us as well, built on a foundation of mutual respect rather than obligation and expectation. Later that night, I sat down to write my response to Tiffany. The path forward wasn't entirely clear, but for the first time in a very long time, I felt hopeful about our future relationship, whatever form it might take. Sometimes the most valuable gift we can give those we love is not financial support or endless accommodation, but the courage to establish boundaries that foster growth and genuine connection. It had taken me 63 years and a seat at the children's table to learn that lesson, but I was finally grateful for the wisdom it had brought. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision regarding a family relationship? What did you learn from that experience? I hope my story has offered some comfort if you're facing similar challenges. Please share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories of life's complicated lessons. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember that it's never too late to discover your own worth.